You're constantly measuring yourself against others, chasing more, and feeling the weight of expectations. How much longer can you keep running this race? What if everything you're striving for, the approval, the possessions, the labels, are the very things that cause your suffering? We suffer because we identify with a false version of ourselves, one built on illusions and comparisons. The roles you play, the masks you wear, aren't who you truly are. What if the key to ending your suffering is to stop clinging to these identities? Are you ready to confront the truth and free yourself from the endless cycle of self-made pain? If you're serious about your personal health, whether you want to stop suffering, get clear guidance on how to stop overthinking, or to be more present in life, now's the perfect time to subscribe to our channel. Like this video if you're ready to grow further as a person. Now, let's continue. This journey begins with the simplest of things, the toys, the possessions, the fleeting moments of pride we hold onto so tightly. They're small at first, but they begin to define us, don't they? As you cling to your identity, you end up in a dangerous game, one that ties your sense of self to things that come and go. What happens when those things are taken away, or they no longer hold the same value? Can you still stand firm when the illusion of who you are starts to crumble? In his book, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle explains that much of our suffering stems from our attachment to the ego, the mind-made self we identify with. He writes, "You are not your mind." When we attach ourselves to fleeting identities, whether based on possessions, accomplishments, or roles, we are doomed to suffer when those things are threatened or taken away. The more tightly we cling, the greater the suffering. This is because, as Tolle suggests, the mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. We have allowed our minds to define us by external factors, and when they fade or change, the mind's sense of self becomes lost, creating pain and confusion. Here is where the ownership game starts. It starts out as a toy, something harmless maybe, but soon it starts to represent you. The universe appears to crumble when someone takes it away from you, because you hold it tightly, claiming it as your own. Pain is unbearable because you have unconsciously linked your identity to something transient. However, the toy's worth diminishes a short while afterwards. Even though it's only an object, in that split second of panic, it seems like everything is at jeopardy. This is the ego's initial muttering, and it grows with every new thing acquired, every new accomplishment, and every transitory feeling of ownership. Tolle highlights this mechanism in his teachings, explaining that the ego thrives on possession and comparison. The ego wants to be the center, and the ego wants to be the center, and the ego wants to be right. If someone is right, it creates a sense of superiority. The attachment to these possessions, whether it's material objects or even ideas of ourselves, creates a false sense of identity. This is where suffering is born, as we take what is transient and make it permanent in our minds. When we lose what we've attached our identity to, the ego fights for survival, and we experience the agony of loss. Egos develop in tandem with individuals. More and more, you feel the urge to find a defining characteristic about yourself. It could be your physical appearance, your skill set, or the reputation you've earned. Still, it's like losing a beloved toy. The pain comes back much like a child's. On a larger scale, the same mechanism is at work. What we hold on to makes us who we are, but it's never sufficient. In contrast, the ego flourishes. "I own this, and you don't," it murmurs, constructing an identity based on our differences. One is constantly required to legitimize our existence, and comparison is the fuel that keeps us going. This insatiable need to define oneself through external factors, whether through possessions, skills, or status, is the source of much of our suffering. Tolle explains this in A New Earth, where he writes, "The ego lives through comparison. It needs others to confirm its identity. Without comparison, it has no substance. The more we compare ourselves to others, the more the ego feeds on its need to feel superior, and in doing so, it creates a sense of inadequacy and fear of loss. The trap is that the ego wants to be something, but in its desire, it builds a house of cards that can easily crumble when challenged. Where conflict arises is in the drive to sustain the ego. Survival is at stake, not merely viewpoints. A person's attempt to disprove your point of view could make you feel threatened. Anything that challenges the very existence of the ego is intolerable to it. For this reason, arguments can easily become violent confrontations, and differences of opinion can lead to verbal and physical abuse. The stronger the bond, the more vulnerable the self gets, and the more vehemently it will protect its artificial boundaries. As Tolle teaches, conflict arises from the ego's need to defend itself. The moment you become aware of your ego, you have already moved beyond it, he writes. The ego, in its desperate fight for survival, will do anything to protect the identities it's built. When someone challenges the ego, it sees it as a threat to its very existence. This is why arguments and disagreements often escalate into conflicts, because the ego perceives any challenge to its identity as an attack. The more we feed the ego, the more fragile we become, and the more likely we are to react defensively, perpetuating the cycle of suffering. However, a darker force is at work. The ego isn't merely personal, it's communal as well. As a result of the identities we take on from our environment, it flourishes in communities. A fan's allegiance to a team may stem from a sense of shared history and culture, rather than individual taste. Gender, nationality, and occupation may become more than just characteristics of your identity for some people. As fleeting as a child's plaything, these labels have the power to influence who we become. Actually, none of those describes you. All that I and my life stuff you tell yourself is fiction. Person's worldview and sense of identity are products of their mental and emotional conditioning. However, the true you is hidden, unheard, and unrestricted behind the story. In The Power of Now, Tolle delves into how the ego infiltrates our communities and creates divisions. The ego loves to create an us versus them mentality, he writes. It loves to create boundaries, creating a sense of separation between us and others. This division is not only harmful on a personal level, but it also creates collective suffering. Nationalism, racism, gender bias, all these are ego-driven constructs that force us to identify with a group rather than see the humanity in every individual. The ego tells us, "You are not like me," and in that moment of separation, suffering begins. But what if you could see past the label? What if you could transcend the ego's need for division and witness the shared humanity that unites us all? Is it possible for you to liberate yourself from the shackles of the many identities, labels and roles that have shaped you throughout your life? Will you be able to release your ego and discover the tranquility that awaits you beyond? As Tolle urges in his teachings, the first step to liberation is awareness. You cannot fight the ego, he writes. You can only be aware of it and allow it to dissolve. In becoming aware of our ego and how it operates, we begin to detach from it. We stop identifying with the thoughts, feelings, and roles that make up our false self. We come to understand that we are not the mind, nor the body, nor the stories we tell ourselves. We are the awareness that witnesses these things. When we experience this shift in perception, the suffering that arises from identification with the ego begins to fade away. The more we recognize the truth of who we are, the more we recognize the truth of who we are beyond the labels, the more we release the grip the ego has on us. The illusion of one's own identity is one of the most subtle and ubiquitous in our daily lives. Saying, "I am John" or "I am Sarah" gives us the illusion that we have finally defined ourselves. The way our voices sound is important to think about as well. The vocal cords produce a series of vibrations that are only audible vibrations in the air. Clinging rigidly to the notion that we are an immutable identity causes us to miss something fundamental. This moniker is merely a mental construct that ensnares us. It does not reflect our true nature. Tolle addresses this very notion of identity in A New Earth, stating, "The self is an illusion that is continuously being reinforced by thoughts. It is not who you are. These thoughts, the ones that tell you you are this or that you are your job, your name, your possessions, are nothing but constructs that keep you trapped in an illusion. But once we see that these labels are not who we truly are, we begin to break free. Freedom comes in realizing that you are not your name, your job, or your body. You are the presence behind all these things. When you let go of the illusion, suffering ceases to exist, and peace takes its place, We go beyond just names, though. Layers are added. All of a sudden, our possessions become an extension of ourselves. I own this. It belongs to me, as early as infancy. We learn to identify with material possessions. If another kid takes away a little kid's favorite toy, that kid can get really upset. That plaything becomes who they are for a split second. Despite the tremendous anguish kids endure, it is astonishing how the toy becomes meaningless as soon as it is taken away from them. The point has been passed. All through life, this pattern keeps happening. People get emotionally invested in many things beyond simply their possessions. This includes their jobs, homes, relationships, and even their physical appearance. When we lose something important, we hurt. But the funny thing is that we tend to forget about the object of our attachment after it's gone. The issue is that this pattern does not only affect youngsters, it lingers with us at all times, evolving into increasingly sinister manifestations as we go through life. This ongoing desire to be identified with something gives fuel to the ego. Things like your work, the people you hang out with, and the automobile you drive start to shape who you are. It's not merely material goods. It also includes skills, reputation, and accomplishments. I can run faster than you, or I scored more points than you are famous examples of young athletes boasting about their abilities. At that same second, their self-esteem is dependent on how well they do physically. What occurs if that level of performance drops? As a result, the ego contracts and starts to look for a new anchor. Identity is in a constant state of flux. These habits affect everyone, not just kids and athletes. For many, particularly young people, still finding their footing in the world, the fight for a more solid sense of identity is an unconscious but profound urge. As an example, consider the plight of disadvantaged youth who, in search of a community, frequently join gangs. People join because they are looking for a sense of belonging, because they lack strong social identities or secure familial systems. They find solace in the group's collective identity. As gang rivalry serves to bolster this ego, tattoos take on symbolic meaning. They internalize the gang's values and view the other as an enemy to be vanquished. The other is necessary for the ego to exist. Comparison and the establishment of boundaries, us versus them, are its lifeblood. Eckhart Tolle, in his profound work, The Power of Now, offers a powerful insight into the nature of suffering, stating, "The primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. Our suffering often arises when we become entangled in the narratives created by our egos. This egoic self constantly seeks validation through comparison, an endless chase that leaves us feeling unfulfilled. The more we identify with external markers of success, whether it be social status, material possessions, or even ideologies, the deeper we entrench ourselves in the illusion of a separate self." Tolle explains, "You are not your mind," urging us to step beyond the identity constructed by our thoughts, which is often a reflection of our collective conditioning. When we think of suffering, many immediately think of physical pain or emotional loss, but the most subtle and pervasive form of suffering is rooted in our attachment to the ego. Our ego thrives on separation and comparison. We live in a world where the metric of worth is often based on how we measure up against others. From the number of social media followers to the type of job we hold, the ego constantly draws lines of distinction, creating a sense of me versus them. This drive is what causes us to suffer, as Tolle explains. Identification with the mind creates a false self, a mental image of who you are, that is continuously threatened by external circumstances. Take a moment to reflect on how much energy we spend competing with others, whether it's comparing physical appearances, material wealth, or even the perceived success in relationships. These comparisons are fueled by the ego's need to feel superior, to validate itself through external means. But, as Tolle wisely points out, these external validations are fleeting. The moment we attain something we desire, we realize it doesn't bring the lasting fulfillment we hoped for. We get a momentary high from the new purchase, the promotion at work, or the approval of others, but then the sense of emptiness returns. This cycle is unending. In the workplace, for instance, we often see a constant competition to outperform others, whether it's in the number of sales made, the size of one's paycheck, or the position within the company. Our worth becomes tangled up in these comparisons. The ego's thirst for validation keeps us striving for more, and with every step forward, the emptiness grows. This is precisely why we suffer. The ego attaches itself to the material, to the transient. But as Tolle writes in A New Earth, the ego is not a thing, but a process. It is an illusion created by the mind. What is it that keeps us locked in this cycle? It's the need to maintain a sense of control over our lives and our identities. The ego craves certainty. It creates an illusory narrative that tells us who we are based on past experiences and future expectations. But as Eckhart Tolle so clearly points out, the past has no power over the present moment. When we let the past or future dictate our sense of self, we are disconnected from the present, and this disconnection is the root of much suffering. We suffer because we are not fully alive in the moment. We are either ruminating on what was or worrying about what will be. Cultural conditioning is another significant source of suffering. From a young age, we are taught to identify ourselves through social roles, expectations, and collective identities. In many societies, certain values are so ingrained that we grow up with a sense of identity tied to them. Gender norms, for example, can trap us in rigid identities. In many cultures, men are taught to equate their value with power, dominance, and control. Women, on the other hand, may be conditioned to believe their worth is tied to being nurturing or subordinate. These cultural narratives are part of the larger egoic construct, and they keep us confined in boxes that limit our true essence. As Tolle suggests, the real you is not the image in the mirror. It is the awareness behind the image, the stillness beneath the mental noise. In our modern world, gender identity is increasingly fluid, and this shift is a powerful reminder of the malleability of our egoic identities. Traditional gender roles are being questioned, and individuals are finding the freedom to express themselves outside of these rigid categories. This shift can be uncomfortable for the ego, which thrives on clear definitions and separations. However, it offers an opportunity for deeper spiritual awakening. When we let go of the identities we cling to, whether it's gender, nationality, or even a profession, we begin to uncover our true selves. Tolle explains that when you no longer identify with your mind, your emotions, or your body, you are no longer subject to suffering in the same way. In the quest for personal growth, one of the most profound realizations is that our ego is not who we truly are. The false self, the constructed I that we've spent our lives cultivating, is just that, a construction. Our true essence is something deeper, something timeless. As we detach from the stories our minds tell us, we begin to awaken to the reality of our being. This awakening is not a new experience, but a return to something that has always been there. Tolle beautifully describes this in The Power of Now. You are the consciousness that is aware of the thoughts, feelings, and actions of the mind. But you are not those thoughts, feelings, or actions. You are not those thoughts, feelings, or are the awareness behind them. Suffering begins to dissolve when we recognize that the mind, with all its constant chatter and identification, is not who we are. We are the stillness beneath the mental noise. The more we can disconnect from the ego and its ceaseless need for validation, the more we can align with the present moment. This alignment is where true peace resides. Tolle's concept of presence is key to understanding this freedom from suffering. Presence is simply being fully aware and engaged in the current moment without judgment. It's the state of being that transcends thought and allows us to experience life without the filter of the ego. When we enter the present moment, we no longer feel the need to compare ourselves to others, to compete, or to strive for external validation. We experience a deep sense of inner peace that comes from simply being. As Eckhart Tolle teaches in A New Earth, awareness is the greatest agent for change. By becoming aware of the ego's tricks and its hold over us, we can begin to dissolve it. The more we practice being present, the more we disconnect from the false self and experience life as it truly is, uncomplicated and free from suffering. This shift in perception is not an overnight transformation, but with practice, it becomes easier to see through the illusion of the ego. The ego wants to keep us in a state of fear, comparison, and dissatisfaction. But the more we align with our true self, our consciousness, the more we experience a sense of peace and fulfillment that no external circumstance can take away. The realization that we are not our thoughts, emotions, or bodies is liberating. It allows us to experience life from a place of stillness, where suffering can no longer have a hold on us. Tolle's teachings guide us toward an understanding of life that is rooted in presence and awareness. When we let go of the ego's need for validation, we begin to experience the fullness of life without the constraints of comparison. In that space, we find not only peace, but also our true purpose. By releasing the ego's grip, we allow ourselves to experience the depth and beauty of life, free from the suffering that comes from attachment to the transient. The journey of self-discovery and spiritual awakening is not about adding more to our lives, but about removing the layers of identification that keep us trapped in suffering. When we step away from the ego's demands and begin to live in alignment with our true nature, we experience freedom, peace, and a deep sense of fulfillment. This is the liberation that Eckhart Tolle speaks of. A liberation from the ego, from suffering, and from the illusion of separation. As we let go of the stories we tell ourselves and the identities we've created, we uncover the truth of who we are. Not the ego, not the past, not the future, but the timeless awareness that watches it all unfold. In this awareness, suffering ceases to exist.